All right, Emily, thanks so much for being on this podcast. I appreciate it. First thing that I want to start off is, just tell the audience, a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the mental health space.
Sure, yeah, and I want to thank you for having me. Yeah, my name is Emily Feldt Shabel, and I'm an associate marriage and family therapist, which means I have a supervisor. Her name is Catherine Alvarado. I'm based in Redondo Beach, California, and I also meet with clients virtually across all of California. And I got started really from a passion of like wanting to support others and going through my own journey of improving my mental health. That inspired me to go back to school and to get my master's degree. And now like I said, I'm working as an associate, so I'm gaining hours to become a fully licensed marriage and family therapist. And it's been a really special journey for me. I've enjoyed it so far.
hmm So tell me a little bit about the work that you do as a mental health therapist.
Yeah, so I work with a wide range of clients, kind of across the lifespan. I work with children as young as 3. I work with tweens, teens, adults, families, and couples. So really, kind of, I have I have my like a little bit in everywhere. But yeah, I also specialize in working with individuals who identify as creatives. So that could be like artists, actors, musicians, people who work sort of like behind the scenes in the film and television industry, editors, writers, and even people who are just like really crafty and have a creative mind. And that is a unique experience for some people. So I have some lived experience in that and a real love for creativity. So I really like to support the individual kind of experience of that.
hmm So, like, did you get started? Were you in the acting space before you got into mental health?
Um, so that's, yeah, my journey is a little bit different than that. I originally went to school for acting, which I really love and enjoyed. And I moved to Los Angeles about like 11 years ago. And at that time, I got really into baking, which is like kind of a weird left turn, but a really fun, creative experience for me. And I became a professional food stylist, and did a lot of work creating like highly decorated cakes and desserts and cupcakes, and sort of working in like marketing and that kind of space, and just following kind of like passions that I enjoyed. And yeah, I mean it's a really unique world, and it comes with a lot of pressure and comes with a lot of joy as well. Um, and yeah, I think that experience and kind of seeing what was hard about it sort of led me back to like the human experience, which is kind of where I started with acting, being really interested in like what's going on with people. And like when people, make choices that aren't helpful for them, like why do they do that? What's actually going on? Um, so it kind of came full circle. And that's when I went back to school and I was like, or really, that's when I went to therapy and I was like, what's going on with me? And then that inspired me um, to get curious about others and like, how can I support others? How can I use this like interest and this sensitivity and like what's going on with people to support in any way that I can.
hmm Like a minute ago, you said that you work with kids, adults, and people in the creative industry. So who's been your favorite demographic to work with?
Yeah, it's so hard to choose a favorite because I really think like each, type of client that I meet with is different. And of course, like every individual is different as well. I'll say right now, I've really been interested in couples work. Like that has kind of floated to the surface for me lately, just with the experiences I've been having with couples and seeing the growth and seeing people really connect and start to build this like through line in their relationship where they're no longer kind of, I think a lot of people come into couples like because there's some conflict, things are hard, and there's all this friction, and it becomes about something bigger. It's like, are we going to work? Like, is this thing that we've been trying to make work, is it going to work? And through some of the couples work, people can come to this understanding that, like, okay, there is a through line here. Whatever's coming up, like, we're going to deal with it, but we're going to deal with it with a trust that, like, there's something really important to us at the core of it all, which I think gives people a lot of confidence moving through some of that friction that they're experiencing. So that's been super rewarding. But, again, it's hard to say because working with all different types of clients is really cool and rewarding.
Mm-hmm. And when you say that you're working with couples, are you working with couples of like different, circumstances? Because they're not just like married couples. There's like people single parents or step parents or like,
Mhm.
people who've had, their spouse has died from an illness or whatever.
Yeah, that's a great question. I currently am not working with any couples that aren't like sort of traditional, like a traditional kind of setup, a romantic partnership. Um, but I would say, like, I think that kind of work that you're talking about is really important and so needed. And I would be so open to working with folks who are like, I've even heard of therapy for business partners, like just two people who are trying to work on something together and stuff comes up, like when we interact with other people, our stuff comes up, their stuff comes up, and it creates a unique mix. So I'll say, to answer your question, I'm not currently, but that work is so fascinating and important, I think.
Mm-hmm. And what sorts of modalities do you use in your practice?
Mhm. Yeah, I have kind of an eclectic style, so I kind of mix a couple different modalities. I was trained psychodynamically, so there's a basis there of kind of like getting curious about people's past and like what happened there. I also use narrative techniques, narrative therapy, strength-based therapy, client-centered therapy, attachment informed therapy. Just a lot. Yeah. That's kind of a lot of big words, but I like to describe my style as getting really curious about the past and then taking that and looking at, like, okay, what's happening now? How can we use that to inform what's happening now? And also, what do we do about it? And like, how can we build some skills or build some understanding and take away some shame. I think a lot of times shame can come up a lot in therapy. Like, how do we soften that? And just with the strengths base, like, how can we use like the strengths you already have to kind of move forward?
Mm-hmm. It's really cool that you mentioned attachment-based therapy because the other day, I was doing a quiz about, no, not the other day, but a week ago, I was doing an attachment style quiz, and it basically asks you like what sort of attachment style you are. I think there's attachment avoidant, attachment anxiety,
Mhm.
attachment secure, and all these other stuff. So I
Yeah.
took it, and there's all these questions like, the and it sort of looks at your relationship between, your parents, how you were raised, and it gives an indicator as to what your relationships are going to be like in the future. Yeah. So I find
Yeah.
that pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yes, you've just kind of gotten attachment theory in a nutshell. Absolutely. It is very much about like, what was the attachment style when you were growing up? Like our primary caregivers, they it's the way they interact with us, they teach us a little bit about like, kind of what to expect in the future. And sometimes that's really positive and sometimes it can be a little bit more challenging. And yeah, that can end up being a template for like how we approach relationships in the future. And it's not permanent. That's a thing that I always tell people too. Like, you can find out what your attachment style is, and then we can work on it, because the goal for everyone is to get to feel more secure. At the core of it all, it comes down to the question of like, do I feel safe? Do I feel taken care of? And that's the goal for everyone, is finding these spaces where we feel secure and safe and like we can turn to people and they will show up for us.
Hmm. But I will say that people are not always in an attachment secure relationship. They're in these
Hmm.
other buckets, so it's like really rare. So it's based off on a report that I got.
Yeah, yeah, you're so right. I mean, yeah, I think, it's so true. A lot of people are kind of struggling with some of this like attachment avoidant, attachment anxiety things happening, and that's where there can be a lot of pain. And yeah, I think that's when a lot of people do sometimes turn to therapy and couples especially, like what's going on here. And it's something I talk a lot about with couples, what it means to sort of move towards building that attachment security. So, yeah.
Hmm. And then how do you sort of, in the therapy room, how do you sort of help couples navigate through whatever struggles they may face, whether it be financial, whether it be other sort of more practical things like
Mhm. Mhm.
family stuff? Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, it really depends on, really what the specific thing that they're trying to work on is. Like you're saying, there's a lot of different, topics that can come up. But I think to boil it down, um, the goal tends to be like how, like building understanding between the two partners. I think that's a big part of couples therapy is like letting each person share their feelings and having the other partner hear that and respond to that in and the idea is like in a validating way, like a lot of things can come up with couples and with just dyads, like two people in the same room. So really like building understanding, building empathy, and then talking about like strengths. How can we use each other's strengths and our strengths to support what's going on and support each other? You know, um, a lot of stuff really boils down to that. Just like essentially like how do we get on the same team? Like do we have the same goals? A lot of times couples end up do having similar goals, just to like feel secure, to be okay, to, to meet challenges. The difference is in kind of like how they reach that. But if we can get people on the same team, then that we start to build that teamwork and we can kind of, you know,
Hmm.
compromise. I think, compromise can be anyway, we start working on the same team.
Yeah, because oftentimes compromise can be difficult because let's say, for
Yes.
example, a couple, gets married, but, a couple of years down the line, they want different things. One wants to focus more on their career, others want to focus more on, their family and all that kind of stuff. So it's not always a fairy tale sort of like in movies, but yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that does happen you know, and that too, like I think it brings up the topic of like you know, the way I work is I like to create just a ton of space for all of that. Like that is so valid that you could just end up having kind of different goals and then the work becomes, you know, do we still want to support each other's goals? Like if one person is not in it anymore, in the relationship, they don't want it, that's valid too. And then we can work around grief, we can work on that. And sometimes like they are trying to be on the same team and they're like, we don't know how, but we want to still be on the same team. And we deal with that too. Like I think it's the phrase that comes to mind is like where there's a will, there's a way. Like people are so have so many strengths and like we're humans are incredible problem solvers. And I always, I know that about my clients and I my goal is to give them the support they need to kind of figure out for themselves what's going to feel right. Like there's no prescribed answer.
Hmm. And also like I feel like movies also provide that sort of theme or idea. Have you ever seen The Breakup? It's
Oh, I
it's
don't think I have.
and so it's about this movie where, this couple, that has been together for I don't know how many years, and they sort of break up all of a sudden, and then they're
Mm.
forced to live together as roommates. And there's a powerful scene where you know, the woman says, um, why didn't you give me flowers? And but then the guy says, it's a waste of money. You didn't like flowers. And so
Mm,
she says, it's not about, you know, it's not about the flowers. It's about, showing up for someone that you care about them.
mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, that sounds so interesting. I'll have to check that movie out. And I think what like I think about when I hear about like you describing that scene is how often like things are about something bigger than the surface level, right? Like just like she said, it's not about the flowers. It's about like you showing that you care. And a lot of times like I have noticed with couples when you really boil down what they're bringing in, whether it's you don't bring me flowers or you don't do the dishes, what's happening here. It boils down to this like, do you care? Like, do I matter to you?
Hmm. And what have you learned in doing this kind of work? Because you work with couples, and couples, they're not always perfect. They go through different things.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like I've learned so much. It would be hard to kind of it's hard to pick one thing. I mean, I think what's coming to mind right now is I feel like I've learned so much about how strong people can be. Like I knew that I think, but every time I get to witness anyone really through my work and my personal life, anytime I get to witness that, seeing people just show up and talk about these hard things and, you know, look for solutions, all this, it just teaches me how strong people are and how just I mean how much a part of the human experience that struggle is. And then when you see someone kind of figure something out or make a shift that starts to feel really good for them, it's so I feel so honored to get to witness that.
Hmm. I know you said earlier that you wanted to work that you wanted to work more with single parents or like step parents. Is that still on your mind, or do you want to focus on something else? It's like a goal that you want to do as a therapist.
Mm, yeah, I do work with parents. I offer like parenting coaching. And that's something, it's an interesting question because I am sort of earlier on in my career and I do have kind of like a wide net. So I think it's always a question for me of like, do I want to specialize down more and kind of get into a groove and see more similar clients, or do I want to keep it open and um honestly, I'm not sure because I enjoy the variety. I enjoy, tackling these different helping folks like tackle these different things that come up. But yeah, I think I don't know. My honest answer is I don't know. I'll just sort of see where the work takes me, I guess.
Hmm. And finally, what sorts of advice would you give to folks that want to go in the mental health space and work with couples, just like what you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah. What advice? I think, oh, that's a good question. I think the advice that I might give someone is just, hmm, trust yourself. I think that's kind of kind of general, but almost on purpose, because I think it can be, especially going into like a mental health field and be like going into a position of I mean truly it's kind of a position of power, like it shouldn't be, but it's seen that way. You're a therapist and people see you as knowledgeable, especially, some clients are gonna think that, perhaps you might know more than them. And I like to remind people that that's not true. Like yes, I have training, but you are the expert in your experience. So I always tell people, I would think some advice maybe I would give is like really just be you, be you and like stay humble and, trust your strengths. And at the same time, like trust that other people have a lot of strengths too. Like just be really clear about that because it's really a collaboration. That's how I see therapy of all kinds.
Mm-hmm. All right.